everybody. Good evening. Yes. I'm Devina. I'm a campaigner for Fair Trade India. I started my journey at Fair Trade close to 5 years ago this January, and I decided within my first day that I don't want to work there. But something clicked and something happened that the journey with Fair Trade goes on, and I'm incredibly passionate about the Fair Trade movement, and it's something that really moves me. And I would like to share some of the stories of what I've seen and what has changed my life. And I hope that you take back something that makes you understand how trade economics work and how we can work together to make it fairer. So I want to know how many people over here understand fair trade, have seen fair trade products, know fair trade. So that's a lot more than I generally meet. So fair trade as a global movement has, aims to promote products that are socially and environmentally sustainable, that come from supply chains that are not exploitative. So basically, bonded labor, modern slavery, human exploitation behind your everyday food and fashion choices.
Hang on, it's correct.
There are a lot of fair trade products that are sold internationally, and there are thousands of fair trade products in the international market because there's a global demand for these products. And we're hoping to create the same movement in India where more consumers opt for products that empower its makers. Given the current crisis in the world today, there is a need for an ethical consumption movement, for consumer demand to push better practices, because we consume a lot of food and fashion, yet there is a social and environmental cost to our everyday decisions, and things are not getting any better. Also, I would like for this to be like a really interactive session. You're allowed to sleep and get bored and tell me you're bored, and raise your hands and ask anything, and get up and ask anything. So let's talk, because most of you already know about fair trade. I know the people who already know, but it's nice to have a good dialogue. So I wanted to find out if you know what is the aggregating crisis that India is facing today. What do you know about what's happening with the farmers? Suicides, right? What is the rate of farmer suicide?
31%. Very high.
So it's one farmer every half an hour. It's the largest wave of suicides in human history. Indian farmers' suicides is one of the problems that we've been facing for so many years. Yet, every time there is a movement or there's a conversation about it, the consumers always want the government to look at MSP and things like that. But I think we need to get brands and corporates to be a little more responsible to the processes and the people. And I think that's where fair trade works with supply chains to ensure that supply chains get fairer, and basically brands are connected to communities of people who make these products. So every time you buy a product with a fair trade mark on it, what happens is that there are communities of farmers and producer organizations that organize themselves into collectives and communicate with the brands on how much they'd like to sell a product for. It also gives them increased market linkages, and they're solving their problems together versus alone. So I think that's one of the most beautiful parts about the fair trade movement, and something that inspires me the most. So can someone tell me what this picture is about? Have you seen this picture before? How many people have seen this picture before? No? One person. The Kisan Long March that happened in Mumbai, and I think this is one that raised a little bit of awareness. A similar march happened with AIKSCC in Delhi, but nobody spoke about it. People like you and I didn't even know that so many farmers are taking to the streets to ask for better prices, better conditions, and I think that just goes to show that there is a massive aggregating crisis that's not being spoken about enough. And even when things like this happen, we always want the government to do something, but we consume so much food and fashion every day, and we're not looking at the social impact of our choices on the people who make them. This is also an insane statistic that 2,000 farmers leave farming every day, and over 7 million farmers have left farming in the past 20 years. And this is all because of how we treat the people who grow our food and how disconnected we are to where our food comes from. India as an economy always consumes sustainably. We always consume from our local neighborhood store. We always knew where our products were coming from, who were the makers, and we had our chai wala and our grocery shop there. Not a lot of journalists wrote about the Kisan Long March. It was something that spread over social media more, but I really commend the journalists from Telegraph who made this front page news. It's indeed blisters that should make India choke on its modern coffee, because we don't think our coffee comes from coffee plantation workers. We don't think that our clothes come from farmers who grow the cotton. I think we've become so disconnected, and in the glitz and glamour of fashion and where products come from, we've lost the story of its makers and its journey from seed to stitch and farm to fork. So, talking about fashion, who likes fashion? Who wears clothes? Let's start with that. Everybody here wears clothes.
Only when I have to.
Yes. So whenever you have to, you wear clothes. And how do clothes impact farmers? The cotton in your clothes impacts the community. 70% of farmer suicides in India today are in the cotton growing regions. And there is the link, there is the story, and there is a very important narrative that we don't hear when we go into a shop and see those big boards, or when you see those big boardings. You don't know where products come from, who are its makers, what is the journey of that piece of garment, and what is the social and environmental impact of it. So another image, another disaster. It's not a really clear image, but this is a 9-story building called Rana Plaza in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The building had a lot of banks and other institutions that worked out of the building, but because there were giant cracks that were developed in the building, the other institutions were shut, but the garment factory workers were forced to go to work. They were slapped, hit, and given a notice that they will not be paid for their whole month's work if they don't go into work that day. The building collapsed, killing 1,133 people and severely injured 2,500 people to the point that they lost their limbs and legs. They couldn't go back to work. They've not been compensated till today. What is even more surprising is that the brands who were manufacturing out of this factory weren't even aware that they were manufacturing out of this factory. So there were brands like Mango, Zaira, Primark, H&M, which were Walmart, that were manufacturing out of this factory. Their tags were found in the factory. But it's very easy for them to say that we buy it from the supplier and we don't know where it's coming from. And I think this was when the global fashion industry really woke up to say who are the makers and who made my clothes. And in 2014, Apu got it to India, where he had headed Fashion Revolution in India. I was an intern in 2015 at Fairtrade, and I called him and I said, I want to do this project called Show Your Label, to take the dialogue down to who do my clothes also. And now we see that Fashion Revolution has added it a lot more to their dialogue, and I think it's increasingly becoming more and more important, considering that there is such a massive social and environmental cost to it. So have you heard of H&M taking back these clothes and offering you a discount?
Yes, like for the basics collection.
Why do they do that?
Trying to make it sustainable.
So that's exactly what is happening today. As the dialogue of sustainability and makers is increasing, so is the corporate greenwashing. We've reached that time where brands are trying to make us feel good to another extent. So when you go to the checkout counters, often you are asked whether you want a paper bag, and if you want a paper bag, there is a certain amount of money you're going to pay for it. And what you do is that you opt for that paper bag, thinking that you've made an environmentally sustainable choice, often not knowing that what you bought in that bag was mostly plastic. And I think that's just one micro level of what we don't see that the brands are doing today. And brands also getting more and more important about these campaigns coming up and looking at newer, more innovative ways of making themselves look great. Anybody here knows of what planned obsolescence is? Yes?
Yes.
Yes? Everybody here knows what planned obsolescence. So, there are most brands. Okay, that's okay, that's nice. It makes sense for me to come down to Goa. So, most brands try to manufacture an umbrella for it to break at a certain point. And for your clothes to have holes in them or their colors to fade or things to happen to that piece over time so that you go ahead and buy more. And that's unfortunately the way consumption is being pushed today. And there's a debatable point that fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world. And if the makers are being treated so unfairly and the environmental cost of fashion is so big, I think we need to act now. So going back to fair trade has been catering to a large international market. I will be absolutely honest that in India we're really small, we're a growing movement. I can speak on behalf of all my colleagues that we're not here to sell products, but we want to create an ethical consumption movement for the world to recognize that there are alternatives and there are better stories and there is hope. Can you tell me what this is? Seeds? Yeah, this is a seed bank, and these are 26 varieties of chilies that I saw at a fair trade farm when I was there last time. Shobna and her friends are trying to make sure that they get together once a year and exchange seeds to protect the biodiversity of the region. And the more we move to the GM seeds and the HYD seeds of the world, we're going to be losing so much of what farmers believe is important to heritage and culture and the country, and what all of us should love, believe in, and want doing. And we all have a little bit of an inclination to garden. We like things growing, but we are increasingly not supporting the people who believe that they are the guardians of the soil and want to do more about it. That's Shobna and her friend, and she had a board behind her that said gender justice. And I said, what does gender justice mean to you? She said, for the first time in my life, my husband's taking care of my kids and I've come here to showcase my jewels and my 26 varieties of chili. And I think for me, that is women empowerment and at least a start towards it. But things go both ways. There was this one trip that I took at the Pratima Organic Growers Association where there were a bunch of women who would beautifully in their saris jump into lakes to catch fish by their mouth. And that was an additional income project that was introduced in the community to support women with more income for their personal needs. They were making a few thousand rupees extra every day. And what happened right after? The men didn't like the fact that women were getting independent and they poisoned the lake with oil. It took BK Pati and his team 1.5 years to clean up the lake. So while we try to do good things, sometimes the society is not ready for it, and I think that there is a need for us to look at multiple levels to ensure that we live in a fairer world. This is Padma Bai and her husband Rajeshwar. Padma Bai is the Sarpanch of the Patel Gura village, and I have had a really delicious meal in their house a few years ago in Adilabad. Can you tell me what these are? What could this be?
Mixing pesticide.
So these are, can you imagine how much water it takes for one plant, and imagine how much it takes if you don't have irrigation in your fields for you to carry water to the fields when you need to. So, and most of the work in the farm is done by women, and the bull work, and men are generally involved in trading and exchanging seeds, which is what we've historically seen. Padma Bai realized that a lot of women were facing health issues over a few years because of the farming practices, and she started a drudgery reduction center, basically to transport water, to have longer sickles and spades that do not put the pressure on your back and increase the work, you know, to increase the efficiency and reduce the load. So that's one Fairtrade Premium story that I'm really proud of, because they started off by doing this for their community, and now they're renting these equipments for 2 to 5 rupees to 200 farmers in neighboring villages. So it just goes to show that when a best practice reaches a community, most communities often want to share it. So the Fairtrade Premium goes back to a farming community more often than necessary. We never tell farmers what they need to do with this premium. Farmers in groups, but you know, things go both ways. There was this one trip that I took at the Pratima Organic Growers Association, where there were a bunch of women who would beautifully in their saris jump into lakes to catch fish by their mouth. And that was an additional income project that was introduced in the community to support women with more income for their personal needs. They were making a few thousand rupees extra every day. And you know what happened right after? The men didn't like the fact that women were getting independent, and they poisoned the lake with oil. It took BK Pati and his team 1.5 years to clean up the lake. So you know, while we try to do good things, sometimes the society is not ready for it, and I think that there is a need for us to look at multiple levels to, you know, ensure that we live in a fairer world. This is Padma Bai and her husband Rajeshwar. Padma Bai is the Sarpanch of the Patel Gura village, and I have had a really delicious meal in their house a few years ago in Adilabad. Can you tell me what these are? What could this be?
Mixing pesticide.
So these are, you know, can you imagine how much water it takes for one plant, and imagine how much it takes if you don't have irrigation in your fields for you to carry water to the fields when you need to. So, and most of the work in the farm is done by women, and the bulwark, and men are generally involved in trading and exchanging seeds, which is what we've historically seen. Padma Bai realized that a lot of women were facing health issues over a few years because of the farming practices, and she started a drudgery reduction center, basically to transport water, to have longer sickles and spades that do not put the pressure on your back and increase the work, you know, to increase the efficiency and reduce the load. So that's one Fairtrade Premium story that I'm really proud of, because they started off by doing this for their community, and now they're renting these equipments for 2 to 5 rupees to 200 farmers in neighboring villages. So it just goes to show that when a best practice reaches a community, most communities often want to share it. So the Fairtrade Premium goes back to a farming community more often than necessary. We never tell farmers what they need to do with this premium. Farmers in groups, gender equal boards of equal number of men and women decide how they would like to utilize the money and what they need to, what they want to do with it. Which just
Unilever, what's Unilever doing there?
Unilever
Unilever has, so when Unilever got into a lot of problems and they were being asked to clean up their act, they acquired Ben & Jerry's ice cream, which is 50% of their turnover and 100% fair trade. So Ben & Jerry were two guys who started Ben & Jerry ice creams, saying that they would want it to be a 100% fair trade brand. So even when they sold it to Unilever, they set up a board and a committee to say that the fair trade dialogue will be something that will be managed by their team members, and Unilever will never be able to eradicate it from their commitments. So I think that's...
So then WFA, you've got Ben & Jerry's there already.
I know, I didn't make it
Nestle
well.
This Nestle Super Shady, which would have.
They both own, Unilever and Nestle both own several small brands that they're trying to get into the conscious space and create the image of
While
being
they
conscious.
continue on
So
their
it's still
regular
a big,
path of disruption, they have this as
Right.
greenwashing.
exactly. So might be greenwashing, but in a way, if you want to look at the silver lining, it's saying that they're giving these brands a way to really expand and increase that scope. Like Ben & Jerry's can do a lot more with Unilever's backing than
It's
the
a
other.
growing market that they're feeding.
For them, it's a financial decision, but it does well as
There's
well.
nothing to do with the decision.
So do they do like ethical advertising or fair trade advertising?
So, you know, this is something that this is a problem that I would love to have, you know. I think that Ben & Jerry's already sells so much without it being fair trade. It's just because of the owners and the decisions that the makers of the company had, that if they had to, you know, and this was the first time fair trade did ice cream globally. So they said that if we have to have a product, it has to be environmentally and socially sustainable and fair trade, because those two kids went to a university where they studied about fair trade. So it depends from brand to brand, but you'll also see there you have Starbucks. Starbucks internationally has made a commitment to sourcing and stocking one variety and one SKU of coffee from whichever country they are at. In India, they had the Italian roast, but they never went ahead and started one range in India. We went through multiple conversations trying to get through to them to get them to make this commitment in India, because it's a global commitment to fair trade. But they said not enough consumers in India know about it, want it, or demand it. Later, when Tata started packaging these products in India, the fair trade mark from the Italian roast was also gone. So, you know, I think it goes with...
No, because if you think about it, what's happening is you're developing the demand for these products. These guys are coming in and seeing a market opportunity. But if instead these guys develop the market for fair trade, it will dramatically change the fair trade.
So, you know, if you...
They're just reactive at the moment. How do you make them proactively advertise fair trade?
I would love to, and that's what most of my job is, but I can't do it alone, which is why I want you all to, you know, do that little that you can do to influence. You know, I'm telling you, every time you're at a Starbucks and you're at the checkout counter and you have a feedback form and you write, I would want a fair trade line. I think that's going to make a difference. Every time you're shopping on Amazon and you type fair trade, the search engines, they do the, you know, they know what consumers are looking for. And I think it's a two-way street, and I think I'm going to get to that on how we're trying to build that consumer movement as well as getting it
But just
moving.
again, just sorry to be,
No,
a
sure,
suggestion
please.
with Starbucks is at the checkout point, when you're asking for a coffee, they can make an offer. Do you want fair trade or not? You know, just like in McDonald's, you get, do you want cheese?
Extra cheese.
But if they prompt it at the checkout counter, you have a huge uptake in fair trade.
I would like to live in a world where everything was fair trade and an organization like fair trade didn't have to exist. Where where a Marks and Spencer could launch an unsustainable line which was not great for the environment, or an H&M could do one, you know, versus the whole brand being unsustainable and doing one line which is fair trade. How many of you over here think fair trade would be expensive? You know,
Yeah.
like, you
Would
know,
be more
and that's the
expensive.
one thing I tell all school kids, that trade economics are made and historically were thought through to include everybody in the supply chain was treated fairly. You know, just because you're doing right by someone does not mean that you're paying extra. There is margins on all products. They're in the top 20 fashion brands in the top 20 richest people in the world, 6 own fashion brands. Yet one farmer in India is committing suicide every half an hour, and their children sitting in terrible conditions making these clothes. So it's all about, you know, making sure that systems change. photo heavy presentation today. Have you heard of any fair trade brands in India?
I work with one.
And I love that one. The first fair trade fashion brand in India is Monasties, which is right across the road from my someone who taught me what fair trade was right in the beginning on my first few phone calls, because at that time we had one fashion brand and a few teeth products and brands that were catering to a global market. But I think there were some people and some brands in India that always believe that the fair trade movement will get bigger, and thank you so much, Atul, for having patience with us over years and years.
You want my laptop?
No, it's not the laptop.
We have another wire as well. Can we get another wire? That's what we offer.
Not good, yeah.
So have you heard of paperboat drinks? Paperboat drinks. So paperboat really helped us by making a 10 rupee product which is fair trade, which really helped us talk about, that fair trade can, you can do right by the peanut farmers and the sugar farmers who grow the ingredients in that product and do right. They also have a massive social media following, and a lot of people consume paperboat, and that's one product that has helped us reach the masses in India over a period of time. They're also looking at becoming a 100% fair trade brand, but it just goes to show that they have a commitment to sustainability and they're going through the process, and that's not a brand is really close to my heart.
I'd like to add to that. I do like paperboard. The designing is cool, but plastic packaging really pisses me off. And so I find that just very difficult to accept. It's, if you're talking about sustainability, you're selling in plastic.
And the fair trade SKUs that they've launched last month, they went up on Amazon yesterday. They've taken out the outer packaging and made that cardboard. So this because we got a lot of messages about that, and we communicated it to them, and we were connected to the decision makers. And brands that make one sustainable step are often more inclined to making a greater sustainable step. So Monasties, when they turn 7, they move to 100% sustainable packaging. And I think that comes with the brand owner saying that I will not wrap it up in plastic, and if something happens to this one piece, we'll deal with it later. And different brands do it over a period of time. As once you get into that thought process and you understand things more, I think sustainability is a journey, and transparency is the first step to sustainability. And I think it's something that bothers me a lot, but I'm really glad that they've taken the outside boxes out to cardboard now, and they have a better communication on it also, so people know about it a lot more. And step by step, it's getting much better. There are multiple thought processes on it. I believe that there are some non-perishable products that should not come in packaging, and the industry should look at that loss. But then some other schools of thought also say that packaging in glass jars would increase logistical costs.
The whole point of packaging food is only bullshit. So
That is true.
we're going back to basics. I mean, it's good to have a cardboard box, but still packaging.
For sure. So the thing is, that's the one thing that is there about the fair trade movement, that we want to work with big corporates to be able to impact larger communities. The thing is that if we look at the ideal world, which would be sourcing from your neighborhood store, bartering, fruits and vegetables with your neighbors, growing what you eat, knowing what you wear, knowing the journey of your everyday consumption choices, that would be an ideal world. But unfortunately, we live in a mass consumption world, which is only promoting more consumption, and it's the important time to move into conscious consumption. Look at what we can do and the change we can influence as individuals, as communities, as businesses, to impact the people on the planet in a better way. I think that's where I come from, and that's what I like to advocate for. And I believe that I'm not the most sustainable person. I care about sustainability deeply, but every day if you add a new habit, and every time you learn about something, or you raise awareness about a cause, or you tag a friend to understand that this is the journey and this is the story, I think things change. What do you think of that?
I don't think it's options are a good idea. I think we have to scale back our aspirations. So concept of like buying stuff. I think that's
So it starts with how is money regulated and GDP and the fact that countries and economies are measured on the basis of how much you produce and consume. Even with the climate crisis today and everything that is happening, we are still looking at promoting consumption and not conscious consumption and not knowing, you
So
know.
I don't know. My point is, I don't think conscious consumption is the answer. I think consumption is the problem, and so we're not addressing it in a sustainable way. I don't think this is an interim measure. I think it's useful, but it's not the answer. You're going to scale down consumption. We're killing ourselves.
So with one farmer committing suicide every half an hour, and every time I go to the farms, I ask farmers that, you know, what message would you like for me to take to schools and audiences? And they always say that we follow the no pesticides, no harmful pesticides, and you know, we follow all these procedures for organic cultivation, and we do everything on fair trade terms, but we get a percentage of the premium on a certain percentage. When is everything we produce on fair trade terms being sold on fair trade terms? So right now in India, we're at the stage where we're trying to solve that problem, where we create that, you know, create that demand for things that are organically grown in communities that are placed far, far away from the cities, that are, where people are working really hard to make and grow these products. And I hope one day we can solve the other side of the problem, so then scaling it down and then saying that brands can have one unsustainable way. That would be my idea. Any other questions, thoughts? Yes.
So when I started, I thought of fair trade as a big movement.
Yes.
When I looked into it deeper, I realized that fair trade is, we say fair trade is new to India, but it's only the fair trade marketing part which is new to India. Fair trade producers and farmer groups have been around for a lot longer. Can you give us a bit of information about the two differences? And also how long has fair trade producer groups been here versus, and what is the role of producer group versus?
So, you know, in India we work with 1,39,400 producer groups, which have 2 to 80,000 farmers. There are tea plantations, there are coffee farmers, there is a range of different produce that comes from fair trade farms, which sometimes cotton is grown with red drum, and you know, they're all, when I say fair trade farm, I basically mean that the farm has certain table is not right. It doesn't take enough.
Anyway, thank you.
Okay, so I think your question was about producer groups and how long they've been there.
Understand the
Yeah.
difference between the two.
Okay, so there was a global demand, and I think it came with the guilt of colonization, where people said that we want to switch to fairer products and promote, you know, better conditions in the aggregated economies, which is when a bunch of what they call them, the hippies and campaigners in the UK and a lot of church groups and institutions got together to say that let's push for the fair trade movement to start, which was about knowing that whenever you spot this one mark on a product, you know that it comes from an ethical supply chain. India was catering to this global demand for many, many years. We have the Makai Bari tea that comes from the tea plantations in the northeast, in Kurseong in Darjeeling, which is, you know, which has been catering to a global demand for many, many years. I've been to some farms in Telangana which are 100% fair trade farms, where everything that they grow is on fair trade terms. Every farmer recognizes the fair trade mark, and they know what the mark stands for and means. And why do they know what the mark stands for and means? Is because of stories like this. This was one of the most beautiful days of my life. I know that everybody over here remembers their first bike and how amazing it felt as a child to ride a bike around your neighborhood. This is a school where a lot of, which is supported by our producer organization, Jitna Organic, in Telangana and Orissa. So this is Telangana, Adilabad, and there were a lot of girls who were going to school every day, but they were not moving up grades. You know why? Because when they had to write their, examinations, the farmer's family had to take them to an examination center, which was 10 kilometers away, which meant that the parents had to leave work for a week and take their kid to write this exam. Which there was a lot of absenteeism. People were going to school, girls wanted to study, but they weren't able to access a way to get to school on time or faster. They had a local auto guy who didn't show up sometimes, and there was a major problem that they recognized in this institution. There was a brand called Dibella that comes from Germany. So Dibella did this campaign where on 1,000 t-shirt, they raised 50 cents per t-shirt to buy 450 girls cycles to go to school and benches to write exams in. And that for me is empowerment. That for me is addressing a need of the community, looking at what is happening and what you can bring to society, and the impact it can bring to the community. This is Motibai and Arjun. Arjun is a farmer. He grows the cotton in the No Nasties t-shirts, and he said that he always wanted to buy his daughter a bicycle, and it's so much nicer that not only does she have access to education but also a bicycle this year. And this happens by connecting a brand to a community. And I think that is the need of the hour today, to look at all those communities that are producing so much on fairer terms and not being supported by the community.
Can you just define what you mean by fairer terms?
So, fairer terms are greater social and environmental standards. Also, what are fairer terms? No harmful pesticides,
So there's lots of social conditions, lots of environmental conditions under fair trade. There's also a couple of core financial principles. One is that there's a minimum support price, which they agree on before the season, and they do this globally but also locally, so that you know that you're going to get that price and it's sustainable for you to farm. Because as you know, with food especially, the price fluctuations are immense, and a lot of times it doesn't even make sense for them to finish farming and they have to dump it. So there's an MSP, which you're guaranteed. And in India, usually, at least in cotton, the actual price is much higher than the MSP, so it doesn't come into factor. But say with bananas, coffee, chocolate.
Cotton, MSPs, and people are still going to teach you a
43 rupees
Because the MSP is too low from the government standards, and for this as well, but there are bigger challenges. So I'll just get to the second point. So one is the MSP. So in principle, it's sustainable farming. The second is above and beyond the price which you get for the commodity. The fairer term is saying that there's a fair trade premium, which is about 10 to 20% depending on the product, which goes directly and allocated to the farmer groups. And that's what she referred to a couple of times. That this is a great example of the fair trade premium being put to good use. The farmer groups decide, not the brands, not the factories, not fair trade India or fair trade international. So those combined, social, environmental and financial, become the fairer trade.
Just a broad thing on the social and environmental thing? Like, what's that? Is it like all organic or no child labor? I mean, what is it?
The social conditions are definitely no child labor, no forced labor, right to unions, associations, guaranteed overtime payments as well.
recognizing farm labor as labor.
Right, recognizing farm labor as labor as well. Environmental conditions doesn't include organic, that's a separate set of standards, but it does promote and recommend that you do sustainable farming in that sense. But it does, there's principles and there's criteria. So right now most of for fair trade they prescribe principles for environment. So better irrigation techniques.
So those are principles but not yet in the criteria.
So there's some principles, some criteria. Like social is mostly criteria. Whereas for environmental, organic and stuff, they recommend it, but the adoption rates are much lower if you say you can only be fair trade if you're organic. Because of that, there are two
understand what the bar is at.
Yeah.
So no
And again, on the if you go to their website, Fair Trade India or Fair Trade International, for each crop and each region, they'll have criteria as well. So that this is the social requirements, environmental requirements for being certified.
Can I add? So in the fashion chemical dye. It doesn't have to be organic dye. It can be natural dye.
So, there is again social and environmental standards at the factories also, which talks about, when you have to stitch something, you wear your glasses and you switch on the lights in your house. And I think decent lighting, often when cost cutting happens and the pressure to reduce price of products happens over a period of time, what most managers in factories do is look at their fixed costs. So they try reducing the wattage of the bulbs, they try reducing the hours of the fan being on, and I think fair trade standards of a certain amount of temperature to be maintained, the sound and noise levels, as well as ensuring that the workers get fair wages, overtime prices is one aspect of what happens at factories. We also have a few brands that, and I'm going to run you through each one of them and what makes them incredibly special. This is my favorite, No Nasty. It's something I've been talking about for years, and what just goes to show that fair fashion can look fabulous. That something doesn't have to look a certain way. I think today a lot of clothing done by some of the most unsustainable brands, which pretend to be environmentally sustainable and socially unaware of where it comes from beyond fabric stage, are not trying to be able to blend into mainstream fashion, becoming fashionable, and I think Jonas has done a fabulous job at it. I spoke about it earlier, but this year when No Nasty is turned 8 and is going to be turning 9 in November, they for a week-long time, they donated 20% of their proceeds to welfare for animals and gold, while paying the farmers a fair price, the workers a fair wage, doing everything, still doing better, and I think that's just goes to show that it starts from there. We also have an athleisure brand called Soul Space, which has really nice athleisure clothing, which is fair trade. This is a photo from Anubha Industries in Gujarat, which makes Izumi denims. These denims use 83% less water, no harmful dyes, and they are made in a factory which uses indigo dyeing as a method to make clothes. So, there is a variety of what makes each one different, and what is amazing is that they all learning from each other and talking about it. What we've recently added to our fair trade dialogue is that while we want to promote conscious consumption, we also want you to look at, what do you do with your products, and most of the brands that we work with want to make clothing durable and sustainable. The Izumi and No Nasties talk about how many years their garments stay good for, and I think that's one thing we need to look at very importantly. Also, with the way fashion is going today, I would tell you that these are all fabulous brands, but the most sustainable piece of clothing is the one that's already in your wardrobe. It's the one that you already own. And we need to, India had this culture of my mum exchanging saris with her sister, and my Ravina wearing my hand-me-downs and things like that, which are very common to our culture and heritage, which we now have become too hoity-toity for, that we don't believe is the right way to consume. And I think that if you want to do something for fashion, organize a swap party, exchange your clothes. If you lose weight and drop the size, make sure the clothes go somewhere else. Charity shops are big internationally. People find no shame in buying out of there. Everybody loves a good deal. But we need to start looking at how much we need to consume in a year, how much we already have, and how much water is gone into making that one t-shirt, and what is the fiber. Unfortunately, you can't see sustainability in fabric, but I think we need to dwell deeper into where the product is coming from. I wanted to show a video, but I think I'm going to tell you about it. So that there's a campaign called Not in Harry's Name, which is when a bunch of children in a fair trade school in UK said that we don't want Harry Potter chocolates if they come out of exploitation. There was a BBC documentary which was published around that time about kids in Africa working in cacao plantations, growing the produce, and they'd never tasted chocolate. And that was the reality of the world. When these kids in school were screening this movie, they said that we want to do something about it, and let's start with Warner Brothers. They started a petition, they started making 1 minute videos that, with the the chocolate frogs, and they said that we want Warner Brothers to make a commitment to these being UGC or Fair Trade certified. They ultimately got J.K. Rowling to sign the petition too, and Warner Brothers to commit for it to be in Fair Trade. And for me, that is the power of consumer demand and what can happen by teaching young kids who care about the future, who care about the planet, and who want to do the right thing. I wanted to ask you all if you've been following Greta Thunberg's campaign. It's fabulous, right? And I can't believe there's so much hate. And if anybody has anything to say about how it's not a good campaign, we'll be talking about it later, because I want to personally solve one or two minds who believe like that. Because, is she pushing an agenda or a propaganda? Is someone teaching her how to speak like that? I don't know. But I think that she's repeating what the best dreams in the world have established. She's built a fabulous campaign. And I think that it's really wrong that there is so much criticism to what a child is saying about what they want for their future. I think it's amazing that she's practicing what she's preaching already to an extent that I'm not capable of. And if she went on that zero emission boat and went all the way there to talk about what she really believed in, I think there's a time. And I think kids have that power. When a child talks to a larger audience, they're more, when a child talks to a brand and says that, I'm your prime consumer. I don't want your chips to come in this packaging. And I want you to look at this. And I think that creates a lot of difference. And working with school kids was something I didn't think I was going to enjoy as much until I realized the power kids have to influence students. How do you think Frederick footballs work? Frederick footballs. What could be the issue with footballs? We can't grow football. How does Frederick football?
Stitching. Having the balance.
How long do you think it takes to stitch one football? 4 to 5 hours. How many hands do you think a football passes through before it gets to you? 10. So it's an extremely labor-intensive process. The FIFA 2014 footballs were traced back to child labor in Sialkot in Pakistan. That's when the world woke up to the crisis and how much child labor is plagued the football manufacturing industry. There are a lot of unemployed adults. The only reason that there's child labor involved in this process is because it's cheap labor. And that's when the world woke up to demanding for Frederick footballs. A few years later, at the Homeless Football World Cup, Prince William supported Frederick footballs and added his voice to the cause. And now we have Frederick footballs in India. The manufacturers were there for a year, but they got 0 orders until there was one article written during Fashion Revolution by a journalist in the Hindu who went to the factory, which I sent to Appu at around 11 p.m. at night. And at 1 o'clock he messaged me saying the Forza Goa Foundation is going to hold these stores and stock Frederick footballs from now on. And I'm sure you recognize these players with these Frederick footballs, and these are the only 2 orders that we've received for Frederick footballs in India, but 900 and 900 footballs. And what is really amazing is the whole community of children who now learn about nutrition based management in addition of the journey for footballers and how it's going. What's really amazing is that alongside the UN General Assembly Week 2 weeks ago, the girls from the Forza Goa Foundation, so in ISL, the Forza Goa Foundation is the only team which has a women's team. They also focus on girls in U12 leagues and above. And these girls won an opportunity to go to New York to talk about their SDG 12 commitment to responsible consumption and production and fair trade. We couldn't organize funds till 1 week before they had to leave, but we managed to send them there, and I'm so glad that happened because they won the best action towards sustainable development goals at the Global Goals World Cup, which is the first sports activism by Women League to talk about what global goals and how we can actually score some real goals. So, big one for the first award. the girls' team in Makai Bari Tea Plantations in Darjeeling and Kaslam, and we play with the fair trade footballs too. And the next time you buy a football, put a mark. It's that easy a switch. And that's one thing that I was talking about earlier, is that within the networks, they understand fair trade so well that when we have a week-long celebration of fair trade, our garment factories are consuming fair trade tea and our tea plantations are playing with fair trade footballs, and they are showing solidarity to each other. But consumers are not making that switch and are hesitant about switching to their alternative choices. And I think that's why we need to know that these products are available. They're available on Amazon. You can, you can find it in most neighborhood stores, go teas on GoAir today. And it's about just knowing to recognize the mark and understand what it stands for to start with. This is my team. These are the people I truly love and enjoy spending a lot of time with. They're really wise, they're smart, they care about the future, and they really know how to talk about fair trade to everybody. So now I've stopped talking to businesses, I take them. And what's really amazing is that when I started the journey with schools, I didn't know what kind of commitment schools were willing to make to fair trade. We didn't want to look like we are here to sell to children. That was not our objective at all. But there is a lot that comes out of teaching a kid about something. There was a department that Vidyashil University in Bangalore set up with the steering committee kids who did a research on if they had to switch between the uniforms that they were currently sourcing to fair trade uniforms, what would be the cost implications of it and what would be the impact. It was 108 rupees extra in the first year, but because it was only 2,000 t-shirts, in the next year when we hit 8,000 t-shirts, there was no extra charge the next year. It went back to the price that they were sourcing at before. And what is amazing is that just by teaching young kids that this is where your products come from, they're so proud of it that their parents would reach out to us to say, I'm a denim manufacturer and my daughter's asking to show them up on the products. We have a fair trade schools program. They do some lunches with fair trade spices and rice. When we launched India's first fair trade school, we thought that we couldn't possibly do this without getting the people who grow the cotton to the school. This is Bhanuben, Divya and Praveen and their family. The reason Divya was selected to come to the school was because there was a fair trade premium project initiated a few years ago called the Disha Scholarship Program. Disha was a scholarship program promoted young girls who would otherwise not have access to going to the district headquarters to get education opportunities. Divya was given the scholarship in class 8 when her parents had decided that they wouldn't want her to study further because they would not be able to afford education for her further. What is really amazing is that she went ahead to top the 10th and 12th grade exams. And we wanted to celebrate that achievement with a bunch of kids and tell them that this is the community that this comes from. These are the people, these are the stories. And let's look at creating more of these stories and pushing greater premium to these communities so that we can move towards education and healthcare and all the really important pressing problems that these communities need to face today. So on the Independence Day of the school, there's generally a turnout on a holiday at 8 a.m. of 40 or 50 parents. The day we launched India's first fair trade schools, the school was surprised by 800 parents because the kids dragged them out to say our school's becoming India's first fair trade school and we'd like for you to come. That's the power of educating one child. You educate 4 adults in the house with that one child, and I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I'm seeing. Young kids going and talking to their parents about, this is where our products come from and we want you to celebrate the movement, and I want my farmer to be paid a fair price. I want no child labor behind my chocolates, and just simple concepts that adults need to repeat a lot more. We also organized a fundraiser to raise money for the family that had come with these seed bombs that would sprout flowers wherever they are thrown, and a lot of interesting activities. Who knows this guy? This guy?
million by.
Yes, we all know.
So, Milind is an amazing guy. He is a believer of the fair trade movement. He wants to support us, wants to look at a long-term plan. He doesn't want to do it to just look great. He also advocates for a lot of causes, but he's been talking about fair trade a lot. His fashion brand Baby was fair trade, and now there's Novotel out in Road that is saying that we've had Milind, a fair trade fan in the hotel, and the fact that people are recognizing. So collaborating with celebrities and people who have a larger voice than us is always something that will amplify the movement further. Anybody knows Wolverine? Hugh Jackman, he has a coffee brand that is fair trade. Very recently, Green Day launched their own fair trade coffee brand. Emma Watson is often talking about sustainable fashion and fair trade. And she's now on an Australian app called Good On You, which only talks about swapping and what are the sustainable brands around you. And I think each and every person who then adds their voice to the movement makes the movement stronger. Last year we did a concert where Farhan Akhtar wore a fair trade t-shirt for Men Against Rape and Discrimination, which was his cause that he was organizing this concert for and making these t-shirts. And he said, I don't want to be wearing a t-shirt that is exploitative, and we asked him to address sexual harassment problems on factory floors, which is a big problem in the clothing industry also. Anybody knows this guy? So Ganesh Johnny is a big influencer and a really fabulous dessert chef. He's really young, CNN, 20 under 40, Forbes 30 under 30. He is one of Bangalore's best dessert chefs, and he was convinced by a group of Vidyashil kids to look at his sugar sourcing and the team in his cafeteria. And he's a believer of now looking at how he runs an academy and he wants to talk to the kids over there, and he really made us think of what we can do by creating a delicious item that he sells to create impact. And Fairtrade never looked more delicious. He made some outstanding desserts that we sold at a bake sale at Vidyashilp Academy to raise money for the kids in the producer organization that we were going to visit during the German school exchange program. We also took a certain amount of these treats to the villages and to the producer school. It's a life-changing experience to be at a farm. It's a different life. You understand that as you go down to the villages of India, every morsel of food is respected, every drop of water is treated like a precious resource, and life works very differently. And I think it was amazing to see kids do that, and I think this is the power of the consumer movement. This is the power of awareness, and this is the power of connecting people to the communities where their products come from. And the only way this country will move forward is when urban schools make that connect with rural schools. The kids now are looking at what the school needs. The teachers are helping the school and the producer organization develop a curriculum so that the kids understand basic English. There was a projector gifted to the school by the local government, but they don't have a screen to project it on. So they're looking at getting them that screen. And I think this is what happens when you connect someone who has resources and someone who doesn't have it. To say these are your people, and they're helping you out in your life. And this is how you can connect with them to create your life. I have someone over here with me who's worked with Fairtrade, Twin Towns, Pondicherry and Origins. And I think, Victor, it would be better for you to talk about what is happening in Pondicherry and Origins.
So there's also a growing movement for Fairtrade for the town. So basically, which means that communities are gathering together, cities and towns are gathering to promote Fairtrade within their borders. So this movement started back in 2004 when Village in England set itself the goal to promote Fairtrade, whether it's in businesses, in schools, in organizations, in its own government. So now this movement has more than 900 towns around the world, and 1900, sorry. And And so this movement started in India 4 years ago with Pushpanath Krishnamurti, with a campaigner for Oxfam International. And so basically they walk during the moment of the COP21 for more than 450 kilometers and launched the movement in India. At the moment, so the cities of Auroville and Pondicherry in Tamil Nadu have been certified. So the certification basically means that the city or different actors in the city, where it's businesses, NGOs, associations, schools, they all try to promote fair trade, which means consuming fair trade, offering fair trade in hotels, restaurants and shops offering fair trade items. And also that the government is making a commitment towards fair trade, so that it's passing a law explicitly saying that there will support fair trade. And so the momentum is growing in India. A broad framework has been designed to help more cities and to help more villages get into the movement. And so we should be growing.
Thank you, Victor, for coming down and helping us set that up. I remember I was almost crying the night before the walk started because I thought this is when the fair trade movement in India is going to take off. It didn't. But, you know, there's so many of these moments when communities show interest to supporting a cause. And I think that this is something that has been going on for really long. But what is amazing is that by the time Push walked from Pondicherry to Kotigiri, while reaching Ooty, Kotigiri had announced that they want to be a fair trade town too. And you know, it's at 64, Push at that point walked for 450 kilometers to fair trade. We left it with Auroville, and his speed was impeccable and his dialogue was greater, and he went to schools and universities along the way to talk about how you can become a fair trade town and how a whole town can commit to greater sustainability and look at bulk procurement and supporting other communities where these products are coming from. So every year we organize a campaign called the Fair Trade Week, which reached 7,000 people last year, but it's about what individuals can do and how we can celebrate fair trade. It's coming up in the third week of November. You can find out more details on week.fairtradeindia.org. The live website is going to go up in 3 days. The idea is that you look at what you can do in your daily life. If you have spices on your kitchen shelf, switch it to fair trade. If you're buying a football, gifting someone something, you have Diwali coming up, you want to give someone a birthday gift, just try switching something to fair trade and see how easy it is, because once you do it, I'm telling you, you're going to do it again. It's just like your other products. You know, there's a range of products. There's a packet of tea for 120 rupees and 700 rupees, and there's a range of what you can select from, but it's about what you can do as individuals within your daily life to create that movement. I feel like there is no reason why people would like to support products that are exploitative. I think we as consumers don't know the journey of the products, we don't know the impact of our choices. We're also looking at the plastic packaging that a masala packet comes, and I hear about it a lot when I go to schools that, you know, what do I do about the packaging? But then let's also look at the product and where it comes from and what the journey of it is and who are the makers behind it and what we can do as communities to support a lot of these communities who really believe like they are the guardians of the soil. 2,000 farmers are leaving farming every day. The next generation will not want to grow food. We are amidst a climate crisis. We are consuming at a rate higher than ever. We are told that you buy a bike, you'll get a girl, you spray on some perfume, they'll come running after you. And I think it's time we start talking about the real dialogue behind these products and the actual difference it makes to communities and celebrating the stories of the people who put in a lot of effort behind making these products. I would like to conclude with this. All questions are welcome, but thank you so much for your time and giving me the opportunity to talk about something that really means a lot to me and something that I would like to work towards and work with communities and people like you all who are already conscious, and it's just that one next step that we can all make together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
How do we find what products the fair trade are looking at the label?
So, you know, increasingly trying to create more platforms where it becomes easily available to go to a fair trade shop. So right now the Better India is looking at creating a fair trade shop. Amazon had one. But very soon on the Fair Trade India website you will have a section which will guide you to all the products that are fair trade in the country. There are also movements like the World Fair Trade Organization, WFTO, that work with arts and craft fair trade products and multiple fair trade products that are available all over.
Do you have any other questions?
In Goa, you can go to Hideaway and they have fair trade coffee. You can go to Vayu, which has started sourcing Black Bazaar fair trade coffee, which is a coffee that is grown within forests, so it protects biodiversity at the same time, empowers a community of coffee plantation workers who are going through a lot of land rights problem at the point. They were exploited to the point that someone would come, weigh up a bag and say, this is how much I think you should be paid for it. And now because they've been connected to Arshia, who's running a fabulous brand called Black Bazaar, with premium, delicious coffee, which is shape grown and empowers the community of workers. It's available in Goa at Hideaway and Vayu. At Novotel, Grand Hyatt and W Goa. In the minibars you find fair trade chocolates, Muscari chocolates. So it's in Crete and right across the road at Monastir they are fair trade. Gosh,
There's
so
some
good
stuff
here.
here.
And
There's
some
stuff in
stuff
PQK
here.
as well.
There's some stuff within People Tree where you find no nasties. There's brands like Q-Trap, Soul Space, Izumi, and maybe that do fair trade fashion right now. We also always talk about, you do these marathons for child education and you print these t-shirts made at 40 or 50 rupees for it. And I think there's an increase. Next time you go for a marathon or run, please ask them where the cotton for that t-shirt is coming from and how much they bought that t-shirt for. And the coaching managers being aware of where it came from.
It all comes down to the cost cutting in the event and a marathon. So it's like, get the cheapest t-shirt.
You worked in one, you know how much they
Yeah,
source it at.
that's how it works. I mean, do we have any other questions?
Do you know how many fair trade businesses or producers there are in India?
1,39,400 producer groups. So because of the 25 years of fair trade in India catering to a global demand and 13 years of producer groups established that were selling products out of the country. In the brand segment, we have 17 certified vendors as of today. So there's tea, coffee, spices, sugar. Sugar is the recent big story, and footballs is the broad categories. I don't know if you guys read about the article about what's happening in the Beed district of Maharashtra. Beed district, BDC just came up. So Indian press is not communicating a lot to us. Like I showed in one of my first few slides that since 2016, farmer suicide record numbers have not even been published anywhere, and women and farm laborers often officially constitute as farmers don't even get into these numbers. On top of that, there is a crazy story that makes me want to throw up, but I think it's important to share that there is a whole district of women in Maharashtra. They don't have uteruses. They've all been forced to have hysterectomies. They work in the sugar supply chains. The contracted labor has deducted the cost of this operation from their salary because they don't want them to take period leave or have kids. And this is the cost of the sugar in the morning cup of coffee. And this is how unaware we are when products that are packaged hit market shelves of where they come from and its impact on the community. So I think that's why I'm really excited about Movana launching a fair trade sugar brand which is coming into hospitality and sachets, and it's going to be increasingly available in a lot of places, and look at some of these problems. We also have Ferrero makes these fair trade source ingredients. They don't use the mark, but they look at making commitments and large commitments to communities, and they promise to pick up a large chunk of sugar from these supply chains in India that we were working with, which helped a brand like Movana to add on to it. And that's sometimes the power of big businesses that commit to a little bit of sustainability for others to be able to pile on the other struggles that come with certification costs for organizing communities or changing practices.
Yeah, how complicated and expensive is a certification?
It's quite complicated. it doesn't, we try to be as inclusive as possible, but sometimes it's not viable to connect a group of farmers which are very few in number where marketing is difficult to operate from. Economies of scale really help. The bigger the businesses, the bigger the commitment, the lesser the load of the certification cost per unit, and it makes sense over time. What is amazing to see is that we don't work with a lot of big brands, but a lot of small brands that we work with don't mind bearing that cost because they want to do their businesses, make profit, while also look at something like this, which is important to them. Sainsbury just recently internationally said they want to walk out of fair trade tea, and their sales dipped for the first time in 80 years, with consumers saying we're not going to buy for you if you don't have the fair trade mark on your products, because they wanted to start their own independent verification. And that's kind of like what CSR is doing in India today, right? 98% of your business is unsustainable, but let's take 2% of your profits and try to do good, and let's look at recurring benefits coming out of it and all of that. So there is a cost, but I feel like the more businesses that come through, you'll be able to, it won't be a great challenge.
And who certifies it?
So we have, within Fair Trade, we have the Fair Trade Marketing Office, FMO, that we are right now. We stay away from the certification wing because we do not want our certification to influence our judgment or our dialogue in any way. We have a group called Network of Asia Pacific Producers, which is a sister concern that goes and does farm training and certifies producers. We also have a unit which is the profit-making unit of Fair Trade International, which is called FlowCert. FlowCert is the unit that certifies these units, and they also get verified by a Dutch. They get audited by a Dutch company as well. So they not only certify, but their practices are then audited by another independent verification center.
Taking this example of the football,
Yes.
so how is it like the process of manufacturing of the football makes it a fair trade product?
So the factory is in Jalandhar in Ludhiana. This was called Legend International. The problems that we faced while we were certifying them was that there was a lot of contracted labor, so people were going back home and manufacturing, so there was no way to verify who worked on that product. There was also incorrect lighting and a lot of chemical processes that could happen. Didn't have proper ventilation in the areas that they were happening. So they looked at proper, masks and gears, also equipment, needles, and it takes a lot of strain in stitching a football actually. It's quite a comprehensive art. So we looked at the processes, the material that is being used, how waste was being treated at the end of the football being made, as well as the conditions of the factory.
So I am dealing with a product where there is metal involved. So I know the metal is coming from the mining thing. Before that I don't know anything. But after that I don't know whole process. I know where this product is being made, how much the labor is being paid. So this can be involved as a fair trade product. Like, can you
Actually, I
explain that?
same question.
So there is fair trade gold in the world, and wine and vodka. But we're not experts at it. I know that everybody at fair trade would like to work with no exploitation in all supply chains. I think agricultural produce is where we've historically got some competence and understanding of how it works and what we can do to reduce the impact of it on communities it comes from. With metal, we've only worked with gold as of now, but there are some Australian companies that are looking at sustainable metals. There are Fairphones and other appliances that they're looking at the journey of verification, cosmetics and a lot of products. But I can connect you to someone who's really passionate about the metal space.
Are you asking more about the metal part or the
My production part. Like my production part is totally taken care. I see the workers are paid well, they are in a very good environment, we pay higher than the other manufacturers.
But before that, where the raw material comes from is the question. That's
It's
like,
the
that's
raw
my
material
question.
also is
We don't
kind
know
of
where the
comes
raw
from the
material is
brand.
coming from.
So,
Cannot
Ivina
see.
mentioned there's two big fair trade organizations, Fair Trade India, Fair Trade International. They work more on the producer groups, where the raw material actually comes from. There's also WFTO, World Fair Trade Organization, and India has Craftmark and stuff, which look at more of the crafts and artisan work, which is more of the process, not necessarily the raw materials. So that what you're talking about, the people who make the bottles or your jewelry and stuff, might be a better fit for that as opposed to the raw material, the producer group. This organization is mostly producer group focused.
It's from where the scratch it's coming from. From the beginning, where it all starts.
Like every fair trade town internationally is a combination of these two movements working very closely together to cater to all sorts of things.
Must be a clean trade.
I'll connect.
So what is the 1 lakh producer organization? What are they actually producing in India?
Everything.